TJ Scott here, your Navy Waves veteran. Yes, I served in the military, the Navy, from 71 to 79. And I have a very special guest on Veterans Forum today. In fact, so special we may do 2 programs with him. And he was in the militia years ago in the 1800s. And yes, you've guessed it, I got Mr. President Abraham Lincoln with me. Thank you so much for joining us on Veterans Forum.
I'm happy to be able to be here.
It's so good to have you here. Now listen, you just got elected. Many states have seceded from the Union. And we'd like to know more about your background if we can, Mr. President, because you have walked into an enormous problem and you're the man who's going to be in charge of trying to fix it. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, we know you were born in Kentucky and moved around and became an attorney and you served in the militia, but tell us about your family background. We'd kind of be more comfortable to know your character makeup, to give the country confidence that you can do this enormous task that's before you.
Well, I hope to have their confidence. It is an enormous task.
It is.
And no one man could do it alone. It's going to take the backing of the people who elected me and the other folks maybe who didn't vote for me as well. And certainly we can't do it without the help of the Almighty.
No, we can't.
But my primary concern is keeping the Union whole. The Union has got to stay together. That's, by the grace of God, it will, but that's the key point, keystone, and cornerstone of our democracy.
Well, let's be honest. Our founding father, George Washington, whom we all revere, didn't fight the English for us to split up.
No, certainly not. And I revere him so much. He is my favorite president. Matter of fact, some of my earliest education, the 2 books that I first read, one was the Holy Bible, and the other was the life of George Washington.
Oh,
and,
wonderful.
You see, books were hard to come by when I was coming up. As I recollect, I was born in 1809, February 12th of 1809, in Hardin County, Kentucky, which is a good-sized county, which a little later on was split in 2, and the area where I was born is now known as LaRue County.
Okay.
It's not far from the Ohio River, south of Cincinnati, Ohio, near a little town called Elizabethtown.
And do we understand your father, was it Tom?
My father
came from Virginia? So
yes.
He was a Virginian? Okay.
Yes, he was a Virginian. His father, whom I'm named after, that was Abraham Lincoln. They had, let's see, there was Uncle Mordecai, and there were a total of 5 of them, and they all split and went their different directions, and we weren't able to maintain contact with them. But I remember Mordecai because I remember the story. My father was, I think, the 3rd in line, and then there were 2 girls. And when Abraham Lincoln Sr. moved the family from Virginia into Kentucky, and one of their earliest friends was a fellow named Daniel Boone.
Oh, okay.
And they would socialize by getting together around the homesteads and telling stories at the fireplace,
right,
and campfires and things. But Abraham Lincoln Sr., or the first, was out clearing a field, and Mordecai and my Uncle Mordecai and my father were out there too. And my father was 6 years old, and Mordecai was about 12, about 6 years older. And a couple Indians came out of the tree line and attacked my grandfather. And one of the Indians had a rifle and shot and killed my grandfather, Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, no. You
Morde-
saw this?
No, I didn't.
Uh-huh.
My father did, though. He
Oh,
was 6
okay.
years of age.
Oh, okay. I
And
see.
so then one of the Indians grabbed my father and and started to run off with him. And had he been successful, you and I would not be having this conversation.
No.
And so, but Mordecai was able to secure a rifle, and he felled the Indian that was running off with my dad. And so Mordecai saved his younger brother.
Well, God bless Mordecai.
Yeah. And then my father was a hard-working man, but didn't have much use for written word or education. He just believed in hard work. He was a farmer and he was a cabinet maker. He was a skilled cabinet maker, so he could build a cabin and he could build the wooden furniture for inside the cabin, the bed and chairs and stools and tables and things like that. And so he used to supplement his farming income with his woodworking skills. But it was the extent of his abilities just to be able to scribble his name.
Now, did he meet your mother in Kentucky then?
Yes, Nancy Hanks Lincoln. He met and married her there, and they had my sister Sarah. I had a sister named Sarah. She's 1 year older than I am, or was, and then me, and then there was another boy that was born, and he was also named Thomas. So it was Sarah, Abraham, and Thomas, named after my father, but he died in infancy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, and Dad was not, Thomas Lincoln, my father, was not very astute when it came to real estate dealings, and there was problems twice in a row on two different places that he had, one where I was born and then one we moved to a year later, so far as ownership and title, the legalities of the land paperwork. He ended up in court over it on the last one and lost.
Might I interrupt and say this might have encouraged you for your becoming attorney yourself?
I think it was in
that's
the root part of the root
quite a
cause,
hardship to buy property and realize you got.
Well, he lost on the first one, but the second one he sold for $300. And it was a pretty good sized tract of land, 40 or 50 acres, and a cabin on it. He sold it for $300, and we moved to southern Indiana. And I was 7 years of age, and we were just there in southern Indiana for less than 2 years. I had just turned 9, and my mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, died of milk sickness, and it's believed that, and there were some friends of theirs, that both the husband and the wife, they also died of the milk sickness, and my mother was nursing them, but she contracted it, and they think they get it through the cow eating poisonous milkweed. And it goes through the milk, and why the rest of the family, why we didn't get it.
I was about to say,
know.
my God, how did you and your sister not come in contact with that?
We don't know. We don't know, and we don't know which cow. You know, it might have been the neighbor's cow or our cow. Everybody seemed, everybody had one. So we're not sure, but
Well, how difficult
that
for
left
the
my
family.
dad with, he's trying to get a crop, clear fields, get a crop in, and what about the housework? You know, food, laundry, and ministering,
Cooking.
nursing, cooking, everything. So Sarah was I was 9, Sarah was 11. It was too much for her to handle. And Dad was working me in the fields, but at 9 years of age, I wasn't strong enough yet to be of that much help.
Right.
More of a gopher. So he left us with our cousins, the Hanks family that had moved out there, left us for a couple of months, and he went back to Elizabethtown, Kentucky, and contacted a lady he knew there, a widow lady named Sarah Bush Johnson. And she had 2 girls and a boy. She'd been widowed. She had her home, which I think was free and clear, and she had a lot of furnishings and a wagon and a team of oxen and a pig and a cow. But she had some debts, and he went back and talked to her about them getting married, and it would be a business arrangement. They knew each other, they liked each other, but there was not the romantic connection.
Right.
That did come later.
Right.
But she initially turned him down because she didn't want to saddle him with her debts, but they each had something the other one needed. He needed a housekeeper and a mother for his children, and she needed a male figure, provider, protector.
May I
And,
say, Mr. President, that's really not unusual for our times. People have to survive and they make those accommodations.
Yeah, and that's
Yes,
what they did.
Right.
And she took me to her heart, and likewise on my part, and she fostered and encouraged my studying. Dad thought it was a waste of time, but he worked me during the day, but at night, by the light from the fireplace or candles, I did my study, and she encouraged my reading, and I learned to cipher, which is mathematics. I learned to cipher to the rule of 3 in multiplication tables with a piece of chalk on the back of a flat shovel, and then you could wipe it clean.
So is it fair to say that Sarah was an educated woman to some extent?
She, to a very small extent, but she had an appreciation for education. She was
Right.
educated just enough to realize how important it was.
Right.
But she didn't
right.
have it. But she,
Right.
and she
wanted better for you and her children.
Exactly.
And did you and Sarah get along well with your stepbrothers and sisters?
Yeah, reasonably
Good.
well, yeah. So
Good.
she had 2 stepsisters, and I had a stepbrother.
Mm-hmm.
His name was John.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so it was Sarah, Bush, Johnson, Lincoln.
Mhm.
And then Dad and I didn't see eye to eye often.
Mhm.
It never really blew up, but I didn't feel appreciated, and I felt used, and so I didn't have the warmest of feelings for him. The age of majority there in Illinois at the time was 21, and so as a teenager and a young man, I grew long and lean and lanky and fairly strong and pretty good with an axe. And so he would loan me out to the local farmers, and their wages that they paid went to him, and I got none of it.
Oh, gee.
Yeah.
Well, I guess he could say you got a roof over your head and food in your stomach.
Yeah. And then I was offered a chance with my cousin Dennis Hanks to take a load of produce by flatboat from Cairo, Illinois, down to New Orleans and sell the produce there and the boat, and then make our way back. And that's where I first saw slave auctions and men and women in chains. And I was repulsed by that. I'd seen black folks before, and there'd been a little bit of slavery in the areas where I was growing up, but it was, in order to have slaves, you had to be a moneyed population, moneyed people, and my folks and the neighbors, we didn't have money to have slaves, and my father was against slavery, and all the folks that we knew were against slavery, but we
Don't
saw
you think that may have helped you get elected in the first place? Because while we definitely respect and admire George Washington and all the Virginians that became presidents, they lived a much better life than
they
what
lived
I'm
a
hearing you
genteel
saying.
life, and many of them
Yes.
had slaves. The founding
Yes,
fathers had slaves,
They
so
did.
that's
They
why
did.
it was not outlawed in the Constitution. It's kind of given a wink and a nod. It's there, and we won't mess with the institution. They did shut off the tap. They made it illegal, the slave trade illegal, to import slaves. But once they're here and you can multiply them, that was all right.
Let's be honest. It was Andrew Jackson who became president, and well, like you, the common touch, men of the earth. You weren't born in wealthy families where you had all these advantages.
That's true.
So I would imagine that those are the folks that helped you get elected, the
Yeah.
common people.
Yeah, I could speak to the common people because I speak their language, because I am one of the common people. I've often told folks that God must love the common man because he made so many of us.
Amen. So obviously you didn't stay with your cousin transporting vegetables. At what point did
No.
you look into becoming an attorney?
Well,
How
that
ambitious?
came a little later, but when we came back from a couple of those trips of hauling produce and hogs and stuff down the Mississippi, I turned 21 then, and I left home and struck out on my own. I made a comment to some folks that I might end up as a piece of driftwood floating through life. I didn't know. But I moved away from where they were there in the very south of Illinois, and they'd moved from Indiana over into Illinois. Dad was always looking, for that new piece of fertile ground and keep moving west. He'd done it about 3 times, and I moved up to a little village called New Salem on the Sangamon River, Sangamon County, and took up a job clerking in a store. And I like people, and by then I was educated enough, not nearly as well as I wanted to be, but more so than most of the people around me, so I could read and write and help them with letters to family and things like that.
Right.
And I love to tell stories, so when quite often the social hub for the town would be around the Cracker Barrel at the general store.
Right,
And
right.
I was sitting there talking and playing and entertaining more than I was working most of the time. And that worked out all right. And we ended up there with there was only a population of 100 folks in that town. And we ended up with 3 little stores. And there was one fellow that I met that named Noah Berry. And he came up with the idea that maybe we should go into partnership and open our own store. And since I was the one that liked to talk to people,
Right.
and he was a bit shy in that department, but he said he knew figures and finances and stuff. He'd do all the paperwork,
so it was
and I'd run the counter.
So it was a good partnership.
Well, I thought so.
Oh,
I
okay.
thought so. But come to find out, we were only in that business, and we ordered all the supplies and everything. We were in that business for nigh on to a year, and Noah up and died on me. He got sick and died.
Oh, dear.
Well, that forced me to have to go through the books,
Right.
take a look at the paperwork,
Right.
and come to find out, we were heavily in debt.
Oh, dear.
We couldn't pay the bills.
Oh,
It took me. I then resolved, you know, I could have thrown my clothes in my saddlebags and got on a horse and skedaddled out of town.
right.
That's not me. I couldn't do that.
Well, besides, didn't you
So-
get to know the people there? And I
Oh,
imagine,
yes.
didn't you know a young lady there that
Well,
you
yeah,
may have been sweet on?
that came along just right after that. Well, what I did, I stayed, and I went to work for another store as a clerk. And during that period of time, I also met we had a tavern run by a fellow named Rutledge, and he had a daughter that was, I think Ann was 20, and I knew her, and she turned 21, and she was unofficially betrothed to another fella who was always gone on business, and she and I just became friends, but that friendship matured and matured and matured, and I fell for her deeply. Before things went much farther, she up and caught the fever and died. One of the major causes of early death in our generation has been typhoid fever.
Right.
And she was one of the first of my connections, family or friends that I knew of that died of that, and that disturbed me deeply. And I threw myself more into my work. I got appointed, I was a storekeeper. I got appointed as a postmaster for the town, and so I was delivering the mail.
Well, that was a bit of an honor, wasn't it?
Oh yes, but there wasn't that much mail, and the periodicals, the newspapers and stuff, they weren't sealed up in anything, so anybody could read it. So while I was walking along delivering the mail, I was reading the papers and keeping up on current events around the country. And I also, and I took this extra job to put the money toward the debt for the store that had failed. I also sent off and got a course in surveying and taught myself surveying and got the brass instruments, which we still have.
Yes.
And I laid out several town plots for towns in southern Illinois.
So you're surveying.
You've heard of a place called Mount Rushmore?
Yes, I
If you
have.
take a look at that, you've got Washington, Jefferson, Teddy Roosevelt, and me. And you know what we call that pile of rocks? The 3 surveyors and the other guy. Teddy Roosevelt was the only one that was not a surveyor.
Yes.
All the
yeah.
rest of us were.
Right, right.
But while I was there at New Salem and doing all these things, there was an attorney there, and I got to be friendly with him, and he said something about that maybe I ought to look into the law. And so he started loaning me books. I started reading the law. In those days, you got to be recognized as an attorney. You had to pass the bar exam.
Right.
But the rich folks and refined folks back east went to Harvard and Yale and went to law school.
Right.
We didn't have that out on
Right.
the frontier in Illinois.
Right.
So I read the books and challenged the exam and passed it. And became,
Challenged and passed. Wonderful.
well, that was after 3 years of reading the books.
Right, right.
But and then I moved on up to Springfield. New Salem is just about 25 miles northeast or northwest of Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean southeast or southwest. So I went on up north to Springfield, and the day I got there, I went into a store. All I had was a borrowed horse from a friend of mine down in New Salem and my saddlebags with my clothes in them. But I was going to have to find me a room and or furniture or something, bedding.
Right.
And I went to this store, and it was run by a fellow named Joshua Speed. And I told him that I was looking for a room, and I wanted to buy some furnishings and clothes and things, but I didn't have hardly any money, and I'd like to open an account and do it on credit, and ask him if he knew of a boarding house or a place where I might get a room. And he sized me up, and he says, well, he says, there is a place that I know of. He says, right up these stairs here in this building. He says, I've got a room up there with a big double bed. He says, you could get your stuff from the store here, and you could bunk up there and work it off in trade because you'd been a store clerk.
Very convenient, very convenient.
So
almost
he
like
turned
the
out
hand
to be,
of God was on you on
yeah,
that one.
Joshua and I have remained friends to this day.
Mm-hmm.
We became close friends, and we've been friends ever since.
Mm-hmm.
But I had studied the law and passed the bar exams, and so I went ahead and found a fellow to partner with for a little while, and went into law practice. But then within a few months, I found William Herndon, and we partnered, and it's still Lincoln and Herndon Law Practice. We still maintain the office in Springfield, and when my service to the country is over here in Washington, D.C., for 1 or 2 terms or whatever it takes, we've kept the shingle, and I'm going back to Springfield when it's all over to resume my part of the law practice.
Well, to be self-taught, you really are excellent with speech writing. And you caught the nation on fire, the House Divided Will Fall series of articles.
Yeah, that speech
Didn't
was
that
on the
help
floor of the Illinois Assembly right there in Springfield in the old State House. I was used to stump speaking to people. That came when I was running for election. I ran for election the first time for the Illinois State Legislature, and the Black Hawk War came up, and I was elected captain of our company from New Salem. And when I got back, there was just a few weeks till the election, and people hadn't had a chance to see or hear me, and so I lost that election. But never give up.
Right.
I ran again. I finally made the state assembly, and that's where I gave that House Divided speech. House divided against itself cannot stand. And I was talking about half slave and half free.
Yes.
I said it would become all of one thing or all of the other. I didn't
Right.
know which,
Right.
but I knew it couldn't go on being both. It would be one or the other.
Is that biblical? Is that a biblical statement? A house divided?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact part of the Bible, but the Bible has been my touchstone for my thinking and obviously
Right.
my writing. So and it's common sense.
Yes,
The
it
Bible
is.
has got a lot of daily living common sense things in it, and I'm a common man, hopefully with common sense.
And very inspired from God Almighty. So,
and then I ran for the U.S. House of Representatives. I was a member of the Whig Party. There were the Democrats and the Whigs. And the Whig Party was staunchly abolitionist, and the Democratic
Right.
Party was pro-slavery. And I ran for the Whig Party with another Whig, and we had it set up where each guy would serve half the term, the 2 top guys. And so the other fellow took the first half, and then I went and took the second half of the term. And it was during the time of the Mexican War, and President Polk was in the White House. And I felt that the Mexican War was wrong, that it was a contrived war on our part with the idea of taking more land from Mexico. You know, they had clear up to Wyoming, California was separate already, but they had, or would become separate right after that war. That's what it was. But so they had California, which was Alta California, and they had New Mexico territory, and that's where Arizona came from, and Nevada and Colorado and those things. Well, I voiced my opinion that you know, everybody believed in this manifest destiny, that it was the destiny of this country to grow to the Pacific Ocean.
Right.
And come hell or high water, and no matter who gets in the way, the indigenous peoples, governments of other countries would just steamroll right over them and take it. And I said that that was wrong.
Yes.
Not only was I not popular in political circles in Washington, but my own constituents in Illinois did not agree with my philosophies on that either.
Right.
So I was a one-term congressman, and then went back home and thought, well, I went back to my law practice. That's what I do.
Right.
And
right.
then in 1858 there was an election for the Senate, a senator from Illinois, and there was one seat open, and the fellow running for it was out of Chicago, and his name was Stephen Douglas. He used to be one of Mary Todd's suitors.
Oh.
That was something else we shared.
Okay.
Anyway,
okay.
but I got her. But I ran against Stephen Douglas, and we had 7 debates in 1858 in Illinois, and he was, I was anti-slavery, and he was states' rights, individual choice. Let each territory or each state decide for themselves. The federal government should have no say in the slavery issue, and I said it ought to be done away with and outlawed throughout the whole country. But I was kind of mild in it. I wasn't a radical abolitionist. We had enough of those, like John Brown,
But now,
for instance.
yeah, but now you're elected. We've got southern states that have went their own way.
Oh, the minute I was elected, the minute the results came in, and they wouldn't let me go out and campaign for the presidency. Well, Douglas won the Senate, and I didn't. But I gave what really put me in the minds of the people. Not only those debates, but I gave a talk at the Cooper Union Institute in New York City, and that Cooper Union speech got a lot of play in the New York papers and the papers in Philadelphia and Baltimore and Cleveland and Chicago, and so throughout the North I became rather well known because of that speech.
Well, and here you are. Mr. President, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. And I suspect you're going to be a very busy president until this war comes to an end. May I come back and talk to you at that time?
Oh, I'd be glad to be with you, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
The whole nation wishes you every blessing for this division to come to a swift end. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
God bless you. This is P.J. Scott wishing you well, and remember to pray for those who are in harm's way, our troops. God bless you, each and every one.